Hello and welcome back to the Making Spirituality Real podcast. Today we're continuing with our analysis of the Parashara Hora Shastra. In the last two chapters of the book and the last two episodes of the podcast, simultaneously, we have covered the book's description of the basic nature of the universe and life from a spiritual perspective, which I encourage you to listen to, even if you are not into Vedic astrology. This is something that should be very enlightening to you. Now, I already said before that I may not be doing all the chapters, only those that contain information that is digestible and presentable in this podcast. But so far, there has always been something to take away from the book. We will see if that continues. And definitely we'll continue today because chapter 3 is very information heavy. It's very, very substantial. And it talks about the planetary characters and description. Now, the first interesting thing that you can find here is that there are several categories of celestial bodies that have relevance according to ancient Vedic astrologers. I will give you a direct quote. Out of the many luminous bodies sighted in the skies, some are stars, yet some are planets, otherwise called grahas. And those that have no movements are the nakshatras, or the lunar mansions, which is a concept known well for those who know Vedic astrology. And there, of course, we have... they also recognize 2 nodes of the moon, but that's as shadowy points, but that's the north node and the south node, otherwise known as Rahu and Ketu, for those who, again, know Vedic astrology. Then follows the list of all the lunar mansions, which, I'm not going to give to you because it's something you can just pretty much Google yourself. And if you know Vedic astrology, you probably know them by heart. But what is interesting, like so far before I keep moving forward, is the list of the heavenly or celestial bodies, or however you call it. So what they're saying is some are stars, which pertains to the constellations that make up the zodiac signs, and some are planets, obviously planets like, sun. Technically, sun is a star, so so Mars, Venus, Jupiter, etc. But then there's the line that says those that have no movements are the nakshatras. So essentially, the nakshatras are described as celestial bodies with no movement, as opposed to planets that do move. Now, remember from the previous chapters that planets, as aspects of dividing, eternally self-dividing and then self-gathering Lord Vishnu, were meant to be living beings. So essentially, this book confirms nakshatras, lunar mansions, as living beings. However, it is said that they have no movement, which is very interesting. Now, what does that mean? This book basically confirms the calculations that I have been using in my practice as an astrologer, especially as of last year, because I've been going through so many years of study, and this is something that I picked up very recently in comparison. So this calculation that I use is based on the tropical ayanamsa. So basically, if you know your tropical signs, they will stay the same. But there's a slight tilt in movement relative to the nakshatras, the lunar mansions, because not of their movement, because since they're located in the galactic center, they don't move, but because of the fact that Earth moves relative to them. So it's the Earth that is moving relative to the lunar mansions, but the lunar mansions are sitting in the galactic center like it's their palace, essentially. Now, beyond the interesting piece of information about the nakshatras being living celestial beings in the sky and them being immobile, which makes sense if you know Vedic mythology, talking about the fact that nakshatras are basically the wives of the moon. So basically they are just like females living in their celestial abodes, having their own home in what we consider the sky, but from their high dimensional perspective, it probably is just like a normal dwelling space. And it's kind of like a representation of a female dwelling inside the house. Like a housewife, like a spiritual housewife, which is very interesting. Then the chapter follows with a lot of basic information, like listing the nakshatras, listing the signs, the degrees, technical information that you can pretty much find everywhere. This is like for people that are They don't know anything about astrology whatsoever, but also doesn't really offer any spiritual perspective for analysis. However, an interesting fact right now from an astrology perspective here is when they move on to naming the Malefics and Benefics. For those who don't know, the traditional Malefics in astrology are planets such as Mars and Saturn, and the nodes of the moon Rahu and Ketu. But what is very well, the Benefics are planets like Venus and Jupiter. But what is very interesting is that here in this book, the Sun is also named as a Malefic, and Moon is also named as a Malefic if it's in its waning phase. What does that mean? That means that during the time of your birth, or in a transit, your moon can be waxing as in approaching towards the full moon, or waning as in going from the full moon towards the new moon. And apparently, if the moon in your chart is waning, that it can also operate as a Malefic, which sad face for me that is the case, with the exception of the waning moon being joined by a benefic planet. So let's say you have a waning moon but it's conjunct Jupiter, then it becomes a benefic. The other interesting point here is that besides Venus and Jupiter, Mercury, which normally would be a benefic, becomes a malefic when it's joined by a malefic planet. So let's say you have a Mercury-Saturn conjunction, Mercury becomes automatically a malefic. Or like if you have a Mercury-Rahu conjunction, so the Mercury becomes a malefic too. Life sucks if you're an astrologer, just kidding. So that was very interesting because it's not really something that you read about in Vedic theory, like the sun especially being a malefic, or the fact that the moon can be malefic, or like basically how easy it is for most planets to turn into malefics, if only by some sort of a twinge of a certain aspect. The only ones that get saved unconditionally, unless they have bad scoring in your own horoscope, are Venus and Jupiter. Now, what does it even mean when a planet is a malefic or a benefic? It doesn't really say that here, but I will explain it for my listeners. A benefic is basically a planet that adds to your life. It's a planet that creates, that throws in new energies into your life. It produces, it augments, it's the plus. So in a way you could say that it's the masculine polarity. A malefic is simply a feminine polarity, so it organizes, reduces, cleanses, purifies, or gives you challenges to overcome. So basically, imagine a hypothetical situation, why both are so necessary. Actually, I made a post about it on my Tumblr once, as an interplay between Saturn and Jupiter, while the reductive forces of Saturn are so necessary, mixed with the increasing force of Jupiter. Because let's say that you are trying to have a really well-organized closet, regardless of gender. So the benefic would be you going to a store and buying, purchasing, acquisition, new things coming into your house. But if you just keep endlessly purchasing things, then you will not really have a very organized, functional wardrobe, right? You need malefics, which is sitting down with a pile of clothes that you have purchased and putting them on a rack, organizing them, maybe sorting them by whatever category you imagine, or maybe throwing away what you don't use. This is what malefics are for. And as you can see, that is very necessary to have any sort of order and any sort of functionality or livability on this planet. So that's why it's so much easier for humanity to, in a way, have their life triggered by malefics. Why? Because most of us come from a backlog of karmic mess that we need to clean up. This is just the way it is. And if we manage to add anything new and positive to our lives, it's a miracle. Because we mostly, as humanity, as a species, as a soul species, have just so much mess to clean up. It takes very little acquisition to create a huge mess that needs to be cleaned up straight away. Just look at the state of our planet nowadays. Landfills filled with garbage, polluted oceans. This is all a result of misused malefics, or malefics not doing what they should be doing collectively, which is cleaning up and making any space you have a livable space, whether that's the planet or just your room or your home. So it's actually really, I think wise that even the sun or the moon can become malefic. I will actually briefly tell you why I think that is the case, which I think should be interesting for you, even if you don't come from a background of advanced astrology. Even for beginners, it should be pretty understandable. And you can say, oh, this is Vedic, but no, that's just life. I completely agree with the sun being a malefic because the sun is the establishment of our kingdom on earth. The sun is, in a way a part of our legacy, like not the kind of legacy that that is just there after we die, but the legacy that we are still enjoying in our older age as we live on earth. And to build your own kingdom, you have to burn away all that is impure that cannot be in your kingdom. You have to establish yourself independently from anyone's influence who could try to mess with your rule. That's why the sun in excess is meant to burn. That's why, when we're outside and we expose ourselves to the sun, we say, well, in small doses it's healthy, but if you're in the sun for too long, you're gonna get a sunburn and it's gonna hurt, right? That's why you put on creams and ointments and sunblock and all this stuff, or you hide in the shade, or you wear even the fabrics on your skin to protect yourself. Why? Because the sun is can be cruel. It can be punishing if it wants to mark its territory. It's a territorial planet. But in order to have your territory built first, you have to overcome things. You have to fight competition. You have to be able to have enough of that vital life force to burn away everything and everyone that stands in your way. So it's not going to just add it to your life. It's about subtracting everything that doesn't work for you. Because being yourself, it's about making sure first that you are not everything that you don't want to be. And only then you can be you. You need to choose. It's a little bit like in The Lion King. There's a scene at the beginning when what was the guy's name? I'm getting old. Mufasa tells Simba, this is our kingdom as far as the eye can see, but to that dark land at the edge, you do not go. And this is the sun. The sun has its kingdom and it only goes as far. And to other places it does not go. But that is being spoken from perspective of a fatherly figure, elderly figure that has already gone through the effort of establishing his territory and his one kingdom and his boundaries. That's why the sun rules the government, because there are territorial lines between the countries. There is politics involved, right? So the sun is not just something that comes to you naturally. You don't just have countries saying, oh, we will let you just put the border wherever you want and we will let you step all over us. No. When you try to step over people, they or even mark your presence in this world, people say no. People tell you to go die, People don't really welcome you that readily into this world, which is, very true. And the ancients understood that the king has to rule with a firm hand or his kingdom will not be sustained. That's why a king that is too meek and too polite is not efficient. That's why Sun is unhappy in Libra, because Libra is supposed to be diplomatic and objective. And the king is not supposed to be diplomatic. He's supposed to tell people, this is what I said and this is how it's going to go. So naturally, you need a bit of a malefic strength here, making Sun a malefic planet. And it's also interesting that Moon can easily be a malefic. Well, it's because of Moon's adaptable nature, but also it's because of the fact that the Moon is very unstable, and as the classic Vedic say, lovesick, it always needs to be around someone. It needs to be surrounded, for better or for worse. So when it's surrounded by a Benefic, then things are gonna go well too. But if it's with any malefic influence, or if it's in any way touched by anything negative, it's just going to get tainted with it very easily. So the Moon can easily be malefic because of its sensitivity and its vulnerability and its being the opposite of what the Sun is, which is a complete lack of independence. The Moon needs others so badly that it will take in everything that it touches, even if the influence is not good for it, right? Because the one thing that the Moon can stand is being alone. It needs constant stimulation, needs to be constantly surrounded. And so it's very easy when you don't have that scrutiny that malefics would otherwise have, that as a Moon you become engulfed by just whatever energy is around you. So you have to be very lucky for that to work. And quite frankly, I think the only possibility for this to work is for the Moon either not to be very aspected, and then it has to be waxing, or then even if it's waning, it has to be aspecting Jupiter. Why? Because the Moon-Venus aspect is not really the best, because Venus perceives Moon as the enemy. So when you have a Moon-Venus aspect, the Moon benefits, but Venus suffers. So that's not really working, right? So here the Moon-Jupiter situation is the best, or like I said, Moon unaspected, but waxing. Cries in waning moon. Oh yeah, the other option that the people are talking about is that they can also work with waning moon being friends with Mercury. But also Mercury perceives the moon as an enemy, so that doesn't really, it's kind of the same situation as with Venus. And yeah, Mercury becomes a malefic if joined by a malefic. Again, cries in Draco Mercury. And again, see, that makes sense because Mercury is about our skill learning. It's about acquisition through exchanging things. So you still get new things, new energies into your life, but you get them through first getting rid of something else. So it's like, it's good because you have fresh energy into your life, but it's not for free. So when you have Mercury with a Benefic, then the trade is always going to be profitable for you. You're going to be lucky, and you're always going to feel like you're winning in any trade. But then if you have Mercury with a Malefic, you may feel like you have to overcome a lot to gain anything from the trade at all. So you may feel like you're kind of, giving away something that's worth more than what you're receiving. So you kind of feel like you're getting screwed with a Malefic Mercury, or like you just need to fight very heavy demons to obtain anything at all. Yes, the one thing that we will talk about is the planetary governances, which is the understanding of what the planets actually mean, which is very disputed in astrology. At first, I will read it from the book, and then I will give you my interpretation. So, the sun is the soul of all. The moon is the mind. Mars is one's strength. Mercury is a speech giver, while Jupiter confers knowledge and happiness. Venus governs potency, as in reproductive potency, while Saturn denotes grief. Underneath the list of planets, there's also a footnote that all these areas of the planets that are designated are relevantly gaining or decreasing in strength based on the strength of the planet. To quote, if the sun is strong, one will have a matured soul and will make abundant spiritual progress, or knowledge and general happiness will be well acquired if Jupiter is well disposed. What's interesting is grief will not be there if Saturn is bereft of strength. So in a way, this book is indicating a weak Saturn as a positive thing, but I personally disagree. We'll get to that in a second because we'll do planet by planet. Okay, so the sun is the soul of all, and that's interesting in the context of that being a malefic, but isn't it true for all the souls in this universe that they have to conquer and overcome to grow and mature? Isn't that the essence of the universe's eternal quest for growth and expansion? If the universe was just pleased with being as it is, it wouldn't form new creations, it wouldn't try to get to know itself endlessly, it wouldn't have curiosity or a drive to keep furthering its existence. And all of this requires overcoming a certain inertia. Something that's not talked about is that just benefics would lead to endless inertia, and the malefics are necessary for progress. So it's very interesting how the sun here is given an almost spiritual perspective of intelligent survival, where I think in many uneducated circles of astrology, the sun is instead described as ego, which is not true. What is the ego is actually the moon. The moon is the mind and the ego and the human consciousness, the human avatar that we have to embody to be able to embark on our adventures. We have to have some sort of a sense of self from our childhoods just to be able to survive on this planet, just to be able to do basic physical tasks. We're not talking long-term survival, we're talking about survival in the moment. We're talking about, being able to do physical things, as in basic physical care. Mars is one's strength. Well, strength in the face of obstacles and endurance in face of challenges. Mercury is a giver of speech, so our ability to communicate with the world, not just through words or mouth, but also through writing and through self-expression. Jupiter confers knowledge, while our natural ability to assimilate or understand knowledge and our ability to be happy, which is very interesting because this is also the reason why I made this podcast, because, like I keep saying, the book is available to all, but there are so many people who look at knowledge and they are not able to grasp it or just translate it into wisdom or just feel intuitively connected to it, and it's something I could always do, which is very funny because my Jupiter is not even that strong. It's in an enemy sign. It's in Libra in the 12th house, so my not the best Jupiter seems to still be quite good at it, even if not perfect. Maybe I'm worse at the happiness part, but I'm okay with the knowledge part. Must be the 9th house moon. Yeah, Venus governs potency, so the ability to reproduce and produce and create the things of value to us. This is, traditionally, this is in a sense of creating a family and sensuality, but that can also be any creation, like kind of the myth of Pygmalion, when the man fell in love with like his own sculpture, basically, and well, he was almost like erotically attracted to his own creations. So it depends on the house of your Venus. Let's say my Venus is in the third house. For me, the creation is going to be my writing or my speech or this podcast or whatever. And then we have Saturn denotes grief. Yeah, now I will touch, and it's going to be the last thing we're going to do today because this is getting way too long. I'm going to touch about why I think that grief will not be there if Saturn is bereft of strength and Saturn denotes grief. Why is grief necessary? Very quickly. If you want me to elaborate on this, please let me know, and I will make a whole separate podcast about why grief is necessary. I could talk about this for 3 hours. Like, at some point you get sick of it, but still having some grief in your life leads to maturity. What is grief? What is Saturnian grief? Grief is that when you own a dog that you love, you have to get up and you have to pick up its shit every day. Excuse the expression. Grief is the fact that everything gets dirty, everything gets messy, everything has to be washed, ironed, cleaned, organized. Grief is the fact that we all die, that the human body decays, that you cannot do the kind of saltos you did at 20 when you're 70. Grief is the fact that you get wrinkled. Grief is the fact that there's loss and death in our lives, not just in our personal lives, but all around us. The fact that the food goes moldy if you don't preserve it well. That you have to make time for maybe not so pleasant things like washing yourself because you get stinky and you have to go to the bathroom, for well understood reasons. And none of those things particularly are pleasant to our bodies or to our souls, right? But then think of difficult experiences that come to us and how they give us a certain understanding and certain wisdom, and how there's a certain sharpness and purity of spirit that comes with dealing from these kind of experiences. And then think of a person that has like a very weak Saturn in their horoscope. Very weak one. Well, you can look by sign, but also by planetary strength if you have the right astrology software. These are the kind of people that go through difficult experiences and they don't properly experience grief at all because Saturn is weak. So because it's birth of strength, it doesn't give them the grief to overcome. And as a result, they learn nothing from it. And as a result, they don't learn responsibility. And then leads to misery. Why? Because Saturn is the last planet that dictates the phase of our lives when we age. And ultimately, when we're older, we all kind of take an account of our lives. And there are moments in our lives when we are alone and we have to be self-sufficient. And these are the people that don't know how to take care of themselves when they're by themselves. If someone doesn't do something for them, they won't do it. They expect people to do everything for them. They don't learn from their mistakes, and so they keep making the same mistakes. So in a way, their inability to experience, process, or feel grief and mature from it, or even feel it in the first place, because the feeling of grief that triggers the whole process makes for a life that is very difficult because they don't know how to deal with a very important aspect of life. Note that the text doesn't say that just because the grief won't be there, that there won't be any difficulties. There will be just a complete lack of ability in being able to face those situations. And as a result, the person will find themselves alone and suffering because no one wants to deal with somebody that doesn't pick up after themselves energetically, No one wants to be with somebody that doesn't pick up their own slack. Let's say, imagine you live with a roommate that never flushes the toilet. You would not want to live with them. Eventually, you would kick them out, right? Let's say you live with someone who never picks up after themselves, never washes their clothes, and you have to do everything for them, and they're basically like a 45-year-old toddler, right? And everyone's going to be sick of that person, and that person is just not going to have a good life. And they will not be loved, which is why Venus and Saturn are friends, because we love things that are clean, and things are clean when we maintain them, right? So anyway, Saturn has the wisdom that dealing with dirt leads to cleanliness. Dealing with grief leads to purity of spirit. A weak Saturn is someone that never experiences it, but as a result, they never deal with anything, so they never really acquire anything truly spiritual, pure, or value. In a way, this weak Saturn, lack of grief, creates an emotionally shallow person because it's Saturn that creates the depth through grief and allows you to overcome things despite the grief. Anyway, this was my longest episode definitely so far. Thank you so much for staying with me so far. We're like, I don't even know if this was halfway through chapter 3, because there was a lot of information, and we'll continue with that next time.